Hello and welcome to Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. Land reforms, land governance, environment. These are some of the issues which are very hot in Pakistan, especially and in the region generally. There are quite a few international issues which do have relevance for the Pakistanis, but they aren't very well known or understood in the country. Today we have a guest here who is visiting from Pakistan, and luckily we got hold of him today. He's Mr. Tanveer Arif. Arif Saab, thank you very much for coming to our studio. So basically we're going to talk to him about his organization, the scope, his own personal role in tackling these issues, and what are the needs of the masses there when it comes to land governance especially, and of course the environment. Again, welcome sir, welcome to the show, Cafe DC. So let's just talk about first your organization, the scope. It's a good acronym, I know.
Yeah.
How do you define it and what do you do with this?
SCOPE stands for Society for Conservation and Protection of Environment. So it was founded in 1988 and formally registered in 1990.
Pakistan based?
In Pakistan. It's a national organization with the Pakistani membership. So we started our work on environmental issues, mainly on land degradation.
And I understand, sorry for the interruption, I understand you were the founding, one of the founding members of the organization.
I was the founding president, but now I'm the CEO.
Please continue.
So we started from the land degradation issues because it's a major issue in Pakistan, although it's not highlighted in media and not understood properly by people. But as you know, the land is the base of environment. You know, everything is related with the land, like forest, water, and agriculture is related to land. So we started working on we started an advocacy campaign against land degradation in Malir Valley, which is an area in Karachi, and it was experiencing land degradation due to sand mining. So due to excessive sand mining, water table was going down, and the farmers were getting unemployed because there was no water underground, and agriculture was suffering badly. So we started an advocacy campaign against this illegal mining, which the sand is used in the construction industry.
Right.
So that was our start, and then we came in contact with the international processes like the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. So UNCCD,
right,
which was born in the Rio summit. So fortunately, I was in Rio, and we started working on UNCCD. So it's an international agreement facilitated by
convention. How many members does it have?
I think almost all countries. Okay. All countries are member of this convention.
The members of the UN, they will be.
Yes, and during the Rio summit, there was a political discourse that the West was interested in climate change and biodiversity, but African countries and Latin American countries and mostly Asian countries, they were concerned about the land degradation. So these three conventions came out of Rio Earth Summit convention.
Great work, Tanveer Saab. But I'm sure you must have faced lots of challenges, and one of them would be the literacy, first of all, and the level of awareness about their own issues. The farmers, even though there are some of the very simple people in Pakistan and other countries as well. So when you started working on these issues, did they have an idea what you were talking about to begin with?
I must say that these are the local people who have the real idea of the situation, of the problem what they are facing. And it will take time for a bureaucrat or a scientist to understand that why the groundwater level was going down, for example.
Because the sand from the ground was being taken away.
Yeah, sand from the riverbeds was taken away, and farmers told us, it was farmers who told us that this is the reason. And we consulted with the scientist, and after such a 4 years long study, they confirmed, yes, this is the reason.
So they already knew it, huh?
Yeah.
This is just the local wisdom, actually.
Local wisdom and local knowledge always, supersede. So I was talking about this convention, and Pakistan is also a member of this convention.
UNCCD, yes.
being a member of this international instrument, we are obliged to implement a national action program. So these days national action program is used for other terminologies like for security, but it was national action program to combat desertification. And we were instrumental in mobilizing government to involve other stakeholders in the process. By other stakeholders we mean farmers, the land users, animal grazers, village people. So gradually we started developing, we means all these stakeholders started making the
your organization and the people who are being affected.
We were very much involved in the formulation of national action program and its implementation, and then we selected an area, Tharparkar, you may have heard about the Tharparkar district, as a kind of implementation area to demonstrate that how the global processes, the global philosophy, the global strategies can be implemented with the local.
Tharparkar is already a desert area, right? And you're talking about the desertification. So aren't you talking about those lands who are like agri lands right now, but because of negligence and these illegal activities, they're being converted into deserts? So what was your reason for choosing Tharparkar, which was already a desert?
I'm pleased you asked this question. There is a confusion about desert and desertification. Desertification is not about deserts. Desertification is a process in which a fertile land slowly converts into a desert. So it can happen anywhere. It can happen in United States as well. But the desert, the definition is land degradation in dryland areas. So Tharparkar is not a desert. Desert, by the way, is a place where a cow and its calf cannot feed in 1 square hectare area. That is the definition of desert. But Tharparkar is not a desert. It's a dry land, you can say. It's a very green, area, green desert. You go there and you see millions of trees are there. But it is facing desertification process because of climate change. Now droughts are prolonged. And
but the climate change it doesn't have to do with the local activities. You're talking about like global phenomenon.
It's
right?
a global phenomenon.
Okay.
I mean, there may be some local level elements, but overall it's a global phenomena, because in South Asia we are facing this shifting of rains, for example, from west to east, and the rainy pattern has also changed.
Global warming has to do with it,
it's implications of climate change, I would say.
Climate change, and then of course global warming. In the West, especially in this country, in the United States, it's a very divisive issue. Do people in Pakistan have understanding of this issue? Do they understand what it's about and how it's affecting their lives and livelihood? I
think people, it doesn't matter whether people understand or not. It matters when the bureaucracy or the people at the helm of the power, like politicians and parliamentarians, they must understand, and they should be ready for that. As you may have remembered that in 2010 there was a massive flood. Unprecedented flood in which 1/5 of Pakistan land area was submerged in water. And that was the consequences of
not doing anything.
Not doing anything. But here we are victims. Global warming is a result of you may know that the greenhouse gases and which are emitted by the industrial countries. But the impacts are being experienced by other countries. Worldwide. The impacts are global. It affects the globe. North, south, east, west, everywhere there are implications. But Pakistan is unfortunately among the 10 most affected countries who have to pay for this climate change.
And without much industrial activity though.
Without any contribution to global greenhouse gases. Pakistan has to, develop industrially.
So yours is also a lobby, even though it's an NGO, but it's also a lobbying group, I understand, right? Or you may have a separate...
we do a lot of advocacy on environmental issues like land rights, like food rights, like protection of wildlife, protected areas, and other issues.
So there is Pakistan, like any other developing country, has so many issues, enormous issues. Some are so like immediate: power, water, and all these issues. Do you find the bureaucrats, politicians, and the rulers do they understand the urgency of your work and these questions?
I think this is a global dilemma. You know, you also see this in United States that we have a development paradigm which is development at the cost of environment. You know, the environment is like an endowment on which everything is based. But when a government comes in power, they always propagate about you know, development plans like building roads, airport, powerhouses, highways. They think that this is development. This is development, but this is not sustainable development. Now we have coined another term, sustainable development or green development, which means environment is going to be affected anyway, but you can take measures to protect environment as well as you do.
It's not either or. I mean, if you're developing the country, it doesn't have to be at the expense of the environment.
Yes.
You can still do all these development projects without harming and hurting the environment.
For example, if you are building a road, you can avoid national parks, you can avoid wildlife sensitive.
And it's not being done right now. Do they understand this?
As in 1990, the government was building a cross-country highway, and it had to go through a national park. And at that time, we raised the issue and we took it to the Sindh High Court, and that was first environmental litigation in Pakistan. And when we raised this issue, then the judges, the judiciary, and the government, then they realized that what is the sanctity of a national park, and we told them that this is an internationally protected area, and you can't do this according to international laws.
On your part, like so finally you got the stay.
Yes, and that project.
And I hope it wasn't challenged.
No. That it was Nawaz Sharif government in I think 93, and they realized it and they rerouted the highway.
Okay.
So I mean, in this way you can avoid environmental impact. There will be environmental impacts, but you can reduce them. You know,
so that's the challenge, to have the right balance.
Yeah. Exactly. For example, if you are going for power production, coal is not the only option. You have hydro, you have geothermal, you have wind turbines, you have many other solar energy. You have options, but there is some politics involved, and there is politics and also money game. There are companies who are pushing the dirty technologies. And
that's the case all over the world. Exactly.
All over the world, you have very strong oil lobby here, and they say that all this.
I mean, they have their case too. I mean, it's about jobs, people's livelihoods. So many families depend on it. Tanveer Sahab, good discussion so far. We have to take a short break. After we come back, you also talked about environmental impact on building highways. Right now, Pakistan is talking about building this corridor, the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So we'll take a short break. Stay with us, please.
It can reduce, traffic on, on the highways. And if you compare both, situations, then you may find out that laying a pipeline was more environment-friendly solution than, putting so many oil tankers on the road.
Welcome back. I'm Faiz Rahman and you're watching Cafe DC. Our guest today is Mr. Tanveer Arif, the Chief Executive Officer of SCOPE, an environment advocacy organization. Welcome back. So Tanveer sir, we were talking about, before we left for the break, we were talking about the impact of these mega development projects on the environment. And of course, one of the projects that we've been talking about a lot these days is the Pakistan-China corridor, economic corridor. What do you think of it? What kind of environmental impact will it have? Has there been a study already? And is your organization doing anything about it, just to understand the project and its impact on the environment?
This is in very initial stages. Still, the route is not decided, and you may have listened a lot of political discourse about the actual route, and nobody knows what is actual route. But like any other project.
But I think there has been already a consensus in the all parties conference? That
No, not yet, not
Okay.
yet. But I mean, some the opposition parties have this feeling that it was rerouted. It had to go through Balochistan and
Yeah,
KPI.
but the Prime Minister actually he came out and they made the demanded changes, so to speak. But again, as you said, the final is still very at initial stages. But my question is, before you start these mega projects, in your opinion, do you have the knowledge of anything being done to understand the impact on the environment?
Yeah, according to the Environmental Protection Act, every project, every mega project or medium project has to go through an environmental impact assessment. It is done by professionals, and this report is then submitted to Environment Protection Agencies, which are provincial agencies and national agency, and then the agency then invites a public hearing, and people from all quarters, they may attend.
So this will go
hearing.
through
This is the
all
process.
these stages.
This is the legal process. Every project has to go through this process, and if the report says that it is against, that the environmental damages are much more than the benefit of the project, then
this can't go ahead.
This can't go ahead, or maybe the agency can ask the project proponents to improve the project, to
make changes, proper changes,
to introduce mitigation. Yeah, and if it is not possible, then project cannot be go through. But it's Pakistan, so I won't speak what happens, and I mean, they follow all these rules, but then they also know how to bypass.
So has your organization taken any stand on this project? Yes, I understand you're for the project, but again, you want to make sure, you want to get involved at this point with as an advocacy organization. Are there other groups which you can form an alliance and just to make sure that yes, good project for the country, major economic impact, lots of benefits, but how about the environment?
As I say, that is in very initial stages, but there is no, I mean, you don't need to see only one-sided picture. Sometime a road project is environmentally beneficial. For example, a pipeline project, which is conveying pipeline oil from one point to other point, it can reduce traffic on on the highways,
trucks,
and if you compare both situations, then you may find out that laying a pipeline was more environment friendly solution than putting so many oil tankers on the road. So it depends upon the environmental
less emission
impact.
carbon.
So it depends upon the entire auditing process, and then after that you say this project is beneficial or not. So it's too early to say that. I mean, we really don't know the actual route of the highway, from which areas it will go through. Will there be any environmental sensitive or ecologically sensitive areas or not? Will it cut through water bodies? Or I mean, when we will see the route, then we will make our opinion, and then we will start advocacy.
Your organization also talks about land governance and land reforms. What do you mean by land governance?
You see, land governance means that the land users, particularly the landless farmers who are working on the land for decades, and if they don't have any legal access or legal entitlement, and they are on the mercy of landlords. So this is a situation we are facing in Pakistan. We have large land holdings, particularly in Sindh province, on which these tenants work, but they don't have legal rights, proper legal rights as the industrial workers have. So there has been, for a long time, you may remember that from Ayub Khan introduced first land reforms, and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto then introduced two series of land reforms, but they were not quite successful because these landlords found out some lacuna in the process, and They, on paper, they distributed the land to their relatives or their tenants, but they kept control on these lands. So we are why we are advocating for land reform, because we believe that this is the way you can reduce poverty by empowering people with their land rights and entitlements, because it is also positive from environmental point of view, because if one farmer owns a land, so he or she will work on that, and he or she will
more
take
productive,
care, take care of the soil, take care of the water and everything. But if he and she is working on somebody else,
I mean, you're basically talking about giving them more stakes.
Yes.
In the land, in the field that they work.
But unfortunately, there is another new phenomena coming, which is called corporate farming. So corporate farming, as you may know, that these days food security is a burning issue in those countries which have land but they don't have water. For example, these Gulf countries. So they are hunting for productive lands, fertile lands in Asia and Africa and Latin America, and these corporate companies, they are coming and they are leasing and buying huge land tracts on throwaway prices. And the host governments are offering them lucrative benefits, like tax holidays, like all kind of, they can import any kind of machinery without any custom duty. So in Pakistan also, during Musharraf time, there was a bill introduced. According to that, this was promoted by the Ministry of Finance, and they invited all, anybody from West,
around the world
to come to Pakistan and invest on agriculture. But our point of view is that why we should not give land to foreigners, because they will cultivate, they will grow food, and they will re-export it to their own countries, and in this way our own population, which is a big population, which is
almost 200 million people,
200 million. So they will be suffering from lack of food. So this is not only the land, this is also water, because water and land are integrated with each other. So
but let's look at I'm just being devil's advocate, so to speak. Let's look at the positive side. I mean, you not only that, yes, some of these lands may not be in use right now. When they come in, they bring in new technology, new machinery, new resources. They may pay better wages to the local farmers, and then through proper legislation, I mean, the local population, the local people may have some share in the crops. So do you think the idea itself is just entirely wrong, or it can be, if it's managed properly, if implemented properly, can also benefit the local population?
Actually, corporate farming is being promoted for the financial investment point of view. That's the only aspect government is seeing. But I would say that it is wrong because corporate farming will introduce mechanized farming. It will not be labor intensive farming, like in USA or Canada. Huge farms are run by only one person with the help of machinery. So it will be a machinery oriented commercial farming. So I don't think that they will be employing large number of people on that. The other things are that it will be a chemical oriented. Naturally, it will be a modern farm. They will be introducing modern technologies like pesticides and these fertilizers and everything, and it will create environmental issues. And if there is no water available, so they may be tapping fossil water, like in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is tapping fossil water deep down, and it has a huge environmental impacts. So I am totally against corporate farming.
Regardless,
but there is another alternate model, which is cooperative farming. You can engage your own farmers, make their cooperatives, and then ask banks, multilateral banks or national banks, to give them finances so that they can organize it, and the money will stay in the country, the food will stay in the country.
So what's the interest of the foreign governments? I mean, they can have the same benefits. I mean, if they help the local governments and local farmers to grow these crops on their own lands and basically just help them export to their countries. Why do they have to come under this banner, corporate farming? You know what I'm saying? This rather than cultivating these lands yourself, you just offer them and promise that you will import to your countries these crops. Can it be?
There may be different models, I think.
But exactly, that's what I'm saying.
And
that can be under a cooperative farming.
But it depends upon in which country you are operating. I mean, in our countries, governance is the big problem. I mean, there are agreements and there are rules and procedures, but then when
the issue of governance. I mean, you're talking about land governance, and especially on the
so we don't support any corporate companies coming to Pakistan. Well, they can come, they can offer technologies, they can offer their technical assistance, but they should not buy lands. I mean, these lands are for our landless farmers.
What if they lease, short-term lease?
Short-term lease would be okay, but then if government bound them not to export food crops and also not to cultivate on primary agricultural lands which are mainly used for food production, then it is okay. Maybe Tharparkar or Cholistan, there are a lot of lands available there, but there are other issues. These issues are about the land rights of local population. For example, in Cholistan, government is allotting land to many people, retired military officers or bureaucrats or players or and they are allotted large tracts of land, but the local people are suffering because it is their first right of local people to have that land.
One final question. Where did you get your funding, the organization? I mean, it's a good, effective organization. Who funds it?
Different sources. Mainly, there is a Pakistan Poverty Alleviation Fund. So our major chunk of funding comes from PPA,
which is semi-government,
which is kind of a semi-government organization. Then we receive funding from different international organizations, UN organizations, foundations. It depends, but mainly we get it from Pakistani source.
Tanveer Sahab, I can't believe on such a serious topic, such a serious subject, the time flew by so fast. We are almost over. Thank you very much for joining us today. Appreciate your work, and hopefully we'll see you again, maybe in 6 months or so when you come and attend these conferences and meetings in the DC area. Thank you very much for watching Cafe DC. I'm Faiz Rahman. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.